Podcasting in the UK is as popular as the US. The latest from Podnews.net with Memberful, helping you build reliable, recurring revenue from your podcast. The Infinite Dial 2021 for the UK has been released. 41% of the UK population listens to podcasts every month. That's the same number as in the US. It's around 23 million people in the UK. The data was paid for by Bauer Media and Spotify. Around 425,000 new episodes were published on Anchor in November, but the company lost 0.7% market share. In the top 10, the top 8 remains unchanged. Captivate is new at 9, beating Megaphone, which remains at 10. I'm an advisor for Captivate. Megaphone published a look at podcast consumption data for Spotify and Megaphone in 2021. Podcast listening on Megaphone more than doubled in Italy. Podcast listening in car increased 28 times, probably driven by decreased car usage in 2020's lockdowns. The most popular show on Podcast Addict has been announced. It's based on the number of episodes listened to, at least 70% of the way through. Stuff You Should Know is number one. We all want another chart where iHeartRadio is number one for podcasts. The published list is for English shows, but we can also tell you that Les Grosses Têtes is the number one French language podcast. Martin van Rossum de Podcast is the number one podcast in Dutch. And I also link to the Danish and German language shows, which I'm not even going to dare to pronounce. The winners of the Australian Podcast Awards, published by Acast, were announced. The Acast Podcast of the Year went to Private Affairs, while the Listener's Choice Award went to Life Uncut with Britt and Laura for the second year in a row. Comedian Whitney Cummings has signed a multi-year partnership with Cast Media. The IAB podcast Upfront will be virtual again in 2022. Whooshka has launched a play portal, making the experience of a private podcast easier, they say. And in his newsletter, Tim Eby wonders aloud whether NPR and member stations have a good enough plan for working together in the podcast space. And in People News, Sarah Van Mosel stepped down in October as CRO from Stitcher. HotPod Insider reports that she'll still be consulting with the company, though. Drew Wellborn left in mid-November and has rejoined talent agency WME. And in podcast news, Centuries of Sound, a project making a mix of recorded sound from every year, has reached 1939. The 4-hour episode only gets into World War II in the last hour. Spoiler alert. Before that, music and recorded clips from the year, including Solomon Linda and the Evening Birds singing Mbube in the only recording studio in sub-Saharan Africa. You'll recognise the song when you hear it. In Podland this week, I speak to Winslow Bright, a music supervisor with Premier Music Group, on the complex world of licensing commercial music for podcasts.
The artists have to have that approval, and they have every right to say, well, I don't want my music in that, in that opening of that podcast.
It's a fascinating look at why it's probably not quite as simple as some people will tell you. And why do so many talented musicians die at the age of 27? 27 Club returns for a new season, this time looking at the career of Amy Winehouse, a once-in-a-century talent that barely made it into the new century. And this podcast is brought to you with Memberful. Maybe your business's financial situation has changed in the past year and you need a proven solution that's quick to launch so you can stabilize your business and grow. Memberful allows you to build a sustainable recurring revenue through membership. They handle all the hard stuff so you can focus on what you do best while earning revenue quickly. You can get started for free. There's no credit card required or anything like that. You can find out more at memberful.com. That's MEMBERFUL.com. And that's the latest from our daily newsletter at podnews.net.